David Parker.
Mr Speaker, I'd like to start with a quote from the newspaper in New Zealand that's got the widest circulation. It's not very old, in fact it's only on Sunday, the Sunday Star Times, April the 29th. The government is fast shredding its credibility as a sound manager of the economy. Each expedient deal it strikes erodes its integrity and political capital. I'm going to repeat that again. Each expedient deal it strikes erodes its integrity and its political capital. I want to come back to the issue of integrity if I have time during this speech. That was Rod Oram. Rod Oram, I think, is a pretty considered person. I know the National Party don't agree with him, but there are plenty of people do. I heard, last time I quoted Rod Oram here, I had a cry from the other side saying that he was a person who was some sort of Labour Party lackey, which I'm sure he would find insulting because he isn't. So I was interested to see if there were any other commentaries that were of similar effect. And the Honourable Annette King passed me something from a management magazine, the management.co.nz. Their magazine in March had an opinion piece on leadership, and in respect of John Key said this: Key seems to have a strong personal following. He could probably sell his vision if he had one and if he believed in it. The fact he doesn't suggests a leadership strategy based more on expedience than inspiration. Mr Speaker, I think those two comments from the media are illustrative of the fact that the public is waking up to the fact that under this government their economic mismanagement is responsible for the fact that the economy is failing to thrive as it should, and that the government continually fails to meet its own projections. Not just the projections of opposition parties or other financial commentators, but its own projections every time it falls off them. And as a consequence, in the last budget policy statement, we saw the Minister of Finance saying that the revenues are $1 billion down roughly compared with where they were at the time of the election and the pre-election fiscal update. And as a consequence, he says we're going to get a zero budget or near to it. Well, Mr Speaker, a zero budget is what you get when the economy is failing. There's no excuses now for the government. We are 4 years into their reign. 4 years. The excuse of the Canterbury earthquakes becomes less and less relevant, and indeed that information was largely before them at the time when the pre-election fiscal update was prepared. We know that National's economic strategy is not working, and yet we have the Prime Minister yesterday in his pre-budget speech delivering a speech which said sticking with a plan that's working. And I thought that was rather an amusing statement, given how things are not going to plan. If their plan's working, why is it that we've got record numbers of New Zealanders heading to Australia? Higher than ever before, month upon month upon month. Why are they heading there? Because rather than the government bridging the wage gap with Australia, that wage gap has grown. Now, I know the government likes to spin these statistics and use different measures of the wage disparity between New Zealand and Australia, so I've looked at all of them, and picking the best of them for the government, that wage gap has grown by $19 a week since the government was elected in 2008. So that's one of the reasons why they're going to Australia. What else is going wrong? We had a report out from the IMF. The International Monetary Fund looks at the performance of economies around the world. Their report in April had the forecast for different countries in the world and how they were going in the world. Our country's paying their way in the world. There was only one country worse than New Zealand in the advanced economies, and that was Greece. That was Greece. I think this should be of concern to New Zealanders because it is proof that another of the government's promises to rebalance the economy has not been kept. Mr Speaker, New Zealanders are leaving for Australia in greater numbers than before, and those left behind are getting sick of the short-term, unprincipled fixes that don't fix the economic malaise that we are suffering under. Labor wouldn't sell our assets. The budget policy statement for the first time laid bare the consequence of that on the government deficit. I've been critical before of the Treasury being lapdogs of the government on this, and I'll say it happily again in this House, or not happily, I'll say it in a House, because I think it's an outrage that the Treasury let the government book the proceeds of sale from the SOEs, but didn't show the drop in income in the books as a consequence of no longer getting the full dividends and profits from those companies. We had lack of transparency on that during the election, but the budget policy statement makes that clear for the first time, that if the sale of the state-owned assets proceeds despite the overwhelming opposition from the vast majority of New Zealanders, if the government still proceeds to proceed with those sales, what happens? The government deficit gets worse. How much? The Treasury says that in 2016 the government deficit is worse by $94 million per annum. That is but one of the decisions that this government is making wrong, which makes the economic outlook of this country worse than it would otherwise be. We've had prices going up since National was elected 4 times as fast as wages. After we had our last zero budget, what happened? We had credit downgrades. And that credit downgrade leads me to another issue. The government said that they were going to avoid credit downgrades, but what is the underlying issue there that for me showed the lack of principle in the government is that the Prime Minister misrepresented the comments of the ratings agencies in respect of opposition parties and tried to pretend, until he was caught out by the rating agencies speaking up and saying that it was not true what he was saying, he tried to say that the downgrade would have been worse under opposition parties' policies. In fact, they said that was not the case. They also emphasised that it's not government debt that's the primary problem in New Zealand, it's total New Zealand debt, our net international liabilities, which continue to get worse. Mr. Speaker, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to follow the trend in the deficit. It was $18 billion last year, it's $13 billion this year. Forthcoming year it'll be about $9 billion. The year after that it'll be half of that 9, and the next year it will be overcome. The government's trying to set up New Zealanders to think that that is economic success, and that if they achieve a balancing of the budget, as we would have in the 2014-2015 year, as we would have, that that's somehow economic success. It isn't. Because every year into the future, New Zealand is getting poorer. New Zealanders' incomes aren't rising. They can't meet their bills in the way that they ought to be able to, because the underlying economy is not thriving. That lack of principle that showed up in respect of misrepresentation of the credit downgrades of New Zealand has had a number of sequels of unprincipled behaviour. We had the tea tapes where the Prime Minister called in the police against the media during the election, and at the end of it, when he wasn't willing to go to court and have his position exposed under cross-examination, he deemed Mr. Ambrose guilty. But he doesn't, he did. Those were his words. Those were his words. Oh, the Minister of Police says it was the police. Goodness, he thinks the Minister of Police thinks it's fair for her and the Prime Minister to deem people guilty. A pity they don't apply the same standard to John Banks. What a double standard. A pity they don't apply the same standard to the disreputable conduct of the Prime Minister appointing Mr. McElroy to the Broadcasting Commission, also known as New Zealand On Air. A pity they don't apply the same standards to themselves for insider deals for the likes of more pokie machines at the casino. A pity they don't stand up with what they said that they would to on Crayfer Farms, where they said they were going to tighten up the conditions, and notwithstanding the fact that the Overseas Investment Office says no increase in exports, no increase in productions, they pushed that through in a joint venture with the government through Landcorp. What a lack of principle. Mr. Speaker, this budget policy statement shows that the economic performance of the government is lacking. People are starting to wake up to that. The lack of a plan for the economy is hurting people. Asset sales and land sales and shonky deals on poker machines are no substitute for a plan to grow the economy. Changing who owns what already exists, changing who owns what already exists via a power company or lands does not improve the output of our economy. Mr. Speaker, the Labor Party agenda, which is pro-education, science, more savings and pro-growth tax reform, is the bunch of measures that New Zealanders need, not what we've got currently.
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, it's